So this is a project inspired somewhat by opportunity. My wife contacted me the other day to say that the company she works for, as part of moving offices, is getting rid of a load of stuff. One of those things was a collapsible conference stand. It kind of expands up and drops down. My wife realized that it was something I would probably like, and I did. Part of that kit is about 20 of these things. In their real usage, they clip into the stand once it's expanded and hold the shape up. But as I say, there are about 20 and you don't need 20 for the whole thing. So I got to thinking, what can I use this for? Essentially, it's aluminium channel. There's a bunch of them, they're all the same length, same size. I wanted to do something about the camera mount that I use in my videos. And I've had this idea that I'd love to mount them from the ceiling. So the idea here was to make some little nubbins that would drop into those chat tracks. So the idea is that one way they just drop in between the sides and rotate 90 degrees and they hold in place. Came up with this idea that I could just use a regular nail, quite a chunky one, and bend it 90 degrees to create a very simple, robust handle that would let me do that twisting at 90 degrees to lock everything in place. Put the nails in place through the baseboard and then used epoxy to hold everything square and straight so that it would be easy to twist everything in shape, and then attach the Lazy Susan to that baseboard, and that's really the substructure of this whole thing. Then I needed to turn my attention to making the articulating arm. Took a scrap of what used to be an oak drawer front to create the first pivot point of the whole structure, and so just set about creating a solid base from which to hang all the other parts of this arm. This seemed like the easiest way, just to create a small groove across there in which to set everything, which I thought would just give it a bit more strength at this base point. This obviously is where all the weight is hanging.
Donald Trump is, he's running a campaign.
This is a pretty gratuitous use of my new mobile shop vac and bench sander setup, which I'm very pleased with. I started out just gluing all of this in place, but later I added a couple of screws just to make it extra strong, because I was paranoid about the idea that this one joint could fall off and send my camera crashing to the ground. As with most of my projects, I pretty much just pick up whatever scrap I have laying around and try and make my design fit the materials I've got. And because of that, I started out thinking that I would use sort of single length arms for each of the pivots of this boom. But having just done a quick test with how much force I could put on before the sort of friction didn't hold it steady anymore, it's really not going to be enough. It won't hold enough weight. So I'm going to add another couple of arms here to give it more friction points at the hinge. That should solve that problem, but obviously then I'm going to run out of material, so I'll have to go hunting to figure out how else I can drum up the rest. I used the first arm as a guide to get the holes for the second two in line and exactly in the same places, so they would all end up at the same length.
I have to be extra nice. I have to really, my vision and their vision, we have to really discuss that. It has to come out in an understanding, the managing the expectations, all of that. But that's a lot more work, I think, So there's a drawback to not using some or having the ability to either draw or to use.
I'm really happy with how easy the mechanism works to just quickly latch this up onto the rail on the ceiling. That worked out really well, but this sort of dubious look on my face right now is me realizing just how much this is wobbling because it's really just mounted on that very narrow strip. So I figured I would need to do something about that. I did a quick hunt and found a couple of good thickness pieces of MDF, cut a couple strips and leave them on either side just to fill in that gap and prevent it wobbling. This blue stuff was actually padding for wrapping around a badminton racket handle, but I figured it would just give it enough squishiness to let me press up against the ceiling and get a good firm fit, which seems to work really well. So I just want to take a quick walk around of the finished item, obviously without the camera in because I'm using that to film this. This end mount is actually something I made a while ago. It takes the same mount off the top of the tripod, it just slides in there, which seemed like the easiest way to make a mounting for the GoPro. That's then just connected to this short arm that gives me a couple of pivot points. All the pivot points at the moment, they have wing nuts on them just to make it a little easier to tighten. All the wing nuts on one side. I ended up going with a 3-2-1 arrangement. So each layer has slightly less force available to hold it in position. That may or may not turn out to become a problem, but for the moment it's okay. The long arm obviously has the most I guess forces playing on it when it's held at an angle and less so at each part. So far it's working out okay. At the top here you can see I made a very rough and ready handle just to help cranking down on those wing nuts to be able to set that really hard. The whole lot obviously rotates on the Lazy Susan. Doesn't wobble too alarmingly from side to side. Most of my shots are probably not going to be that dynamic, so it shouldn't make much difference. It's more about being able to position this where I want for a shot and leave it there than it is about rotating it around, although rotating it around is fun. I quickly set it up in a couple of places just to give it a try above the lathe. This is nice because I can mount it without picking up vibration from the lathe and get a nice tight shot, and down by my bandsaw and pillar drill. I think it's going to work out nicely. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please think about subscribing. I've set myself a personal challenge for this year to try and get to 500 subscribers, at which point I will finally justify buying a DSLR to try and up the photography and videography of these videos. So if you feel like supporting that, it would be much appreciated. Share the video around. Thanks a lot. See you next time.